Have you ever walked into a place and felt like you didn't exist? Not in some deep, poetic way. I mean really invisible. You're standing there, fully present, and yet, no one sees you. That's exactly what happened to Keanu Reeves. On that chilly evening, at 61 years old, wildly successful yet profoundly grounded, Keanu walked into the grand lobby of one of his own five-star hotels, a crown jewel in the empire he quietly built, and not a single soul acknowledged him. The irony? He owned the place. And yet, in that moment, he was just a shadow unseen in a palace he created. Something was wrong. Have you ever felt ignored in a place where you thought you mattered most? Comment 1 if yes, 2 if no. And hey, where in the world are you watching from? This is Motivation for Success, where real stories carry real emotions. Subscribe now if you believe dignity should never be mistaken for status. Now let's step into the moment that changed everything. Keanu Reeves had always believed that every moment, no matter how fleeting, held the potential to change the course of his life. On that particular evening, as he entered the sprawling, opulent lobby with its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and impeccable service standards, he felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if he had become a ghost in his own domain, completely invisible despite his towering presence and the aura of success that had defined his career. Yet, as he approached the front desk, an unsettling chill ran down his spine. Here he was, a celebrated actor and a man known for his quiet intensity, being met with an indifference that cut deeper than any insult. It wasn't philosophy or abstract musings about life's insignificance, this was raw and personal. Every step he took echoed with blank stares and an overwhelming sense of being overlooked. He had arrived that night with nothing more than his reservation and a determination to understand why the impeccable service he had once prided his empire on seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. As he reached the reception desk, his gaze met Samantha's, a blonde in her early 20s whose body language screamed disinterest. Leaning back in her chair, eyes glued to her smartphone, she radiated detached boredom. Keanu cleared his throat gently, expecting the warmth of a customary greeting, but the only sound was the soft tapping of her fingers as she scrolled through messages. "Excuse me, Samantha," he said, his voice calm and measured, masking the storm raging silently within him. There was a long, pregnant pause before Samantha finally deigned to lift her eyes, her expression one of mild annoyance, as if his presence were an inconvenience rather than a guest of honor. Without the warmth or courtesy that any patron should expect, she replied with a dismissive monotone, "I have no record of your reservation." Keanu's heart pounded not with anger, but with a deep sense of betrayal. This hotel, a symbol of excellence in hospitality, had once been synonymous with attention to detail and unparalleled guest service. Yet here, in the very heart of his empire, he felt diminished. A surge of memories from past experiences, of accolades earned, of countless nights spent perfecting every nuance of the guest experience flooded his mind. He knew something was deeply amiss. For days leading up to that moment, a series of complaints had come flooding in from discerning guests who had encountered uncharacteristic lapses in service. They spoke of rude staff, of rooms that mysteriously became unavailable to certain customers, and of an overall atmosphere that was beginning to erode the hotel's hard-earned reputation. Keanu Reeves had been accustomed to handling minor issues in a calm, procedural manner, a phone call to the manager, a discreet internal audit, and the regurgitation of corporate jargon intended to reassure anxious patrons. But the incident unfolding before him was not a trivial glitch in the system, it was a deliberate act of negligence, a calculated snub that struck at the very heart of his legacy. Without preamble or fanfare, Keanu decided he would not let this injustice pass silently. Disregarding the conventions of formal protocol, he chose to address the matter head-on, without a tailored suit, without the protective veneer of celebrity status, and certainly without an entourage to cushion his words. He stood there, calm and resolute, as if determined to remind everyone in that glittering hall of his true worth. "I have a confirmed reservation," he said plainly, producing his phone to reveal the digital proof. Samantha's eyes flickered over the screen, but her response was nothing more than a bored shrug. "The system doesn't lie, Mr. Reeves," she retorted, her tone laced with condescension. "Perhaps you made an error. It happens." Her words stung, not because they were overtly aggressive, but because they underscored a dismissive arrogance that left him questioning his own significance in a place he had built with so much sweat and dedication. Keanu's mind raced as he recalled every detail of the hotel's internal system, a system renowned for its precision and reliability. It was impossible for such a flawless mechanism to falter without external interference. And then, as if the universe had conspired to confirm his suspicions, he retrieved his secondary phone, the one with unfettered access to the hotel's internal records. With deliberate keystrokes, he logged into the system and navigated to the activity log, his eyes widening as he discovered the unthinkable: his reservation had been manually deleted, and the action was traced back to Samantha. In that moment, a silent fury enveloped him. He knew that behind Samantha's indifferent facade lay a decision made in a fleeting moment of disdain, a decision to render him invisible, to reduce his presence to that of an unwelcome anomaly in an environment that was supposed to cater to excellence. With a measured inhale, Keanu leaned slightly over the counter, his voice dropping to a low, controlled murmur. "Tell me, Samantha, why did you delete my reservation?" His words were calm, yet each syllable carried the weight of countless hours spent building an empire that now stood on the precipice of decay. Samantha's face, which had until then been a mask of impassivity, betrayed a flicker of anxiety. Her mouth opened and closed in a futile attempt to muster an explanation, but no words emerged. For the first time that evening, the veneer of indifference crumbled, replaced by palpable uncertainty. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken accusations and a promise of retribution. Keanu could almost feel the eyes of every guest in the lobby burning into him, as if their silent judgment was urging him to expose the farce that was unfolding. Yet he held his tongue, knowing that the moment required a delicate balance between public reprimand and calculated justice. Instead, he allowed a slow, satisfied smile to spread across his face, a smile that was as enigmatic as it was determined. "I will not let this stand," he declared softly, his voice steady and imbued with an undercurrent of resolve that seemed to echo off the marble walls of the lobby. With that, he stepped away from the reception desk and made his way to the manager's office, a place that until now had been shrouded in a disconcerting air of complacency. The manager, Derek Lane, was a middle-aged man who had long mastered the art of avoiding conflict. His eyes, normally filled with a benign emptiness, widened in panic as Keanu strode into his office without the customary knock. "Derek," Keanu said, his tone laced with quiet authority, "we need to talk about what is happening at the front desk." Derek stuttered, fumbling for words as his face turned a shade of pale that spoke of guilt and foreknowledge. I was going to handle it," he managed to say, his voice betraying a feeble attempt at justification. But Keanu was beyond platitudes and empty promises. His eyes, deep and unyielding, fixed on Derek as he continued, "I have just witnessed my own reservation being deleted. And your inaction has allowed this situation to fester for far too long." Derek's face crumpled as he tried to defend himself with vague references to training and oversight, but Keanu's penetrating gaze left no room for excuses. "This is not a mere oversight, Derek," he said firmly. "This is a deliberate act of negligence, a clear sign that the standards of service in this establishment have been allowed to decay. And I will not stand by while my legacy is tarnished." The confrontation in the cramped manager's office was brief but searing. Derek's attempts at rationalizing the incident were met with a cool dismissal that left him speechless and visibly shaken. It became clear that the roots of the problem ran far deeper than a single act of misconduct. The system, which had once been the backbone of the hotel's success, had been compromised not by a technical glitch, but by the human failings of those entrusted with its upkeep. Samantha's careless deletion of the reservation was merely a symptom of a far more pervasive malaise, a malaise that had slowly seeped into every corner of the establishment, corroding the principles upon which it had been built. As Keanu left the manager's office, the heavy silence of the lobby enveloped him once again. The atmosphere was charged with an intensity that was almost tangible, as if every guest, every employee, and every inch of that opulent space was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. He knew that public accountability was inevitable. With a measured stride and an air of unyielding purpose, he returned to the front desk where Samantha still sat, her eyes fixed on her phone as if trying to erase the memory of her misdeed. "Listen up," Keanu announced, his voice resonating with authority that silenced even the most skeptical murmurs among the onlookers. "Things are about to change around here." The words were not merely a threat, they were a promise of transformation. In that moment, every guest in the lobby understood that the era of disregard and mediocrity was coming to an end. The young clerk who had nervously inquired about corporate oversight, the bellhop who had adjusted his hat in anticipation, and even the few guests who had mustered the courage to watch from a distance, all were now witnesses to the reclamation of standards and respect. Reaching over to the hotel's phone, Keanu dialed a number that he knew would send shockwaves throughout the corporate headquarters. When the line clicked and the voice on the other end answered, he spoke with measured precision, "This is Reeves. Shut this hotel down immediately for a full-scale audit. I want every guest compensated, every complaint reviewed, and every employee re-evaluated. If they can't meet the standards we set, they're terminated effective immediately." His words reverberated through the lobby, and the silence that followed was deafening. The shock was evident on every face, from the seasoned employees to the bewildered manager who had already begun to crumble under the weight of his own incompetence. For a long moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, as if in a collective realization, the gravity of the situation sank in. The guests exchanged glances, the staff huddled in anxious clusters, and even the grand chandeliers appeared to shimmer with the promise of impending change. Keanu's presence had not only exposed the failings of the hotel's management but had also set in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably alter its future. With a final, satisfied nod, he turned on his heel and walked toward the elevators, leaving behind a scene of stunned silence and mounting anticipation. Once inside his suite, Keanu wasted no time. He settled at his desk, opened his laptop, and began an exhaustive review of the hotel's internal records. Every report, every complaint, every note of dissatisfaction was scrutinized with the meticulous attention of a man who had built his empire on the pillars of excellence and trust. It didn't take long for him to uncover the breadth of the systemic failures. Samantha's name appeared repeatedly in reports of misconduct, instances where guests had been blatantly disrespected, where complaints had been dismissed without proper investigation, and where policies had been twisted to serve personal biases rather than the ideals of customer service. The records painted a damning picture, a pattern of negligence that extended far beyond a single incident. The more Keanu read, the more his resolve hardened. This was not merely a matter of professional pride, it was a personal affront. Every report of mistreatment, every documented grievance, was a stain on the legacy he had labored to create. It was a betrayal not just of his trust, but of the very principles that had guided him throughout his illustrious career. Determined to restore the honor of his establishment, Keanu set about implementing sweeping changes. First, Samantha was blacklisted. Not only would she never work in any of his hotels again, but her name would be forever associated with the breach of trust that had undermined the guest experience. Derek, whose ineptitude had allowed the situation to spiral out of control, was given one final chance, a chance that, as Keanu made clear, would not be squandered. He began reaching out to every aggrieved guest, personally ensuring that each one received not only a full refund but also a complimentary stay and VIP status for their next visit. It was not enough to simply apologize. Keanu wanted each guest to feel valued, to understand that their experience mattered far more than the bottom line. In his carefully measured communications, he conveyed a sense of genuine regret and an unwavering commitment to rectifying every mistake. The hotel's reputation, which had been tarnished by a series of avoidable errors, would be restored through a combination of uncompromising accountability and a renewed focus on excellence. As the night wore on, the transformation of the hotel was set into motion. Employees who had long been complacent were suddenly thrust into a state of alertness, aware that their every action was being scrutinized. The once unchallenged front desk, which had been a symbol of indifference and disregard, was now a focal point of accountability and reinvention. The shock that had rippled through the lobby was only the beginning. In the days that followed, every aspect of the hotel's operations would be overhauled, every protocol revisited, and every member of the staff retrained to meet the exacting standards that had once made the establishment a beacon of hospitality. Yet, even as the wheels of change were set in motion, Keanu could not shake the deep, personal sense of betrayal that had first gripped him that evening. It was a feeling born not only of professional disappointment but also of a profound loss of faith, a belief that the values he had instilled in his empire were being systematically undermined from within. The memory of that moment, standing at the reception desk with a heart heavy with both sorrow and determination, would haunt him for a long time. But it was precisely that pain that fueled his resolve to rebuild, to restore the hotel to its former glory and to ensure that no guest would ever again feel invisible or disrespected in his presence. In the quiet solitude of his suite, as the soft hum of the city outside mingled with the distant echoes of a collapsing regime, Keanu reflected on the nature of power and accountability. He understood that true leadership was not measured by the accolades one received or the wealth one accumulated, but by the courage to confront injustice and the determination to set things right, no matter the cost. His journey that night had been one of painful revelations, a stark reminder that even the most meticulously constructed empires were vulnerable to the corrosive effects of complacency and neglect. Yet, it was also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that could rise above adversity and forge a path toward redemption, one difficult decision at a time. The next morning, as the first light of dawn crept through the elegant windows of his suite, Keanu Reeves felt a renewed sense of purpose. The events of the previous night had been a catalyst for change, a spark that ignited the fire of reform in an establishment that had grown too comfortable in its own mediocrity. With the resolve of a man who had faced down his own demons, he began drafting a series of directives, clear, uncompromising mandates that would reshape the very fabric of the hotel's operations. Every detail was scrutinized, every protocol revisited, all with one overriding objective: to restore honor and dignity to the guest experience. As news of the audit and the sweeping changes began to circulate among the staff, there was an air of both trepidation and hope. Employees who had once operated in a haze of indifference now found themselves at the crossroads of redemption and accountability. In hushed whispers and furtive glances, they acknowledged that something momentous was taking place, something that would redefine the culture of the hotel for years to come. Keanu's voice, calm and resolute, echoed in the corridors and in the hearts of those who had long awaited a return to excellence. Throughout the following days, as the audit proceeded and every facet of the hotel's operations was meticulously examined, Keanu remained a silent but omnipresent force. He reviewed every guest complaint, every staff report, and every internal memo with the discerning eye of a man who had sacrificed much to build his dream. It was a grueling process, fraught with difficult decisions and moments of raw vulnerability, but each step brought him closer to the truth, a truth that lay not in the shortcomings of a single employee, but in the systemic failures that had allowed such negligence to persist unchecked. The transformation was gradual yet inexorable. Under Keanu's unwavering leadership, the hotel began to reclaim its lost luster. New training programs were implemented, management protocols overhauled, and a renewed emphasis placed on genuine human connection and respect. Every guest who walked through the doors was greeted not as a mere customer, but as a valued individual whose experience was sacred. And as the policies evolved and the staff began to embrace a culture of accountability, the hotel once again became a sanctuary of impeccable service and refined elegance, a living testament to the idea that redemption was always within reach for those who dared to demand better. In those quiet moments when he found himself alone, Keanu reflected on the cost of change. There was a bittersweet satisfaction in knowing that the events of that tumultuous night had not been in vain. The humiliation that Samantha and the complacent manager had suffered was not merely punitive, it was a necessary reckoning, a moment of catharsis that had cleared the way for a new era. He knew that true justice was not about vengeance or retribution, but about the courage to confront one's shortcomings and to rebuild from the ashes of past mistakes. And as he gazed out of his suite's window at the sprawling city below, he felt a deep, abiding hope, a belief that, in the end, even the most broken systems could be mended, and that every soul, no matter how bruised, had the capacity for renewal. By the time the hotel's transformation had become evident in every polished surface and in every courteous smile, Keanu Reeves had already begun planning his next steps. The events of that night had served as a powerful reminder that leadership was not a static state but a dynamic process, one that required constant vigilance, humility, and the willingness to stand up for what was right, even when it meant confronting the very people who were meant to uphold the standards of excellence. His resolve was unyielding. He would not allow his legacy to be tarnished by the careless actions of a few, nor would he let the ideals he had fought so hard to instill be eroded by complacency and apathy. In the end, the saga of that fateful evening was more than just a tale of customer service gone awry, it was a profound exploration of the delicate balance between power and responsibility, a narrative of redemption and renewal that resonated with anyone who had ever felt overlooked or undervalued. Keanu Reeves emerged not only as a man of immense talent and success but as a guardian of the very principles that made excellence possible. His actions that night reverberated far beyond the walls of the hotel, serving as an enduring reminder that true leadership demands courage, accountability, and the unshakable belief that every individual deserves to be seen, heard, and respected. And so, as the hotel gradually reclaimed its place as a bastion of impeccable service and refined elegance, Keanu Reeves continued his journey not just as an icon on the silver screen, but as a visionary leader committed to ensuring that every person who crossed his path would never again feel like a ghost in a room full of strangers. The night of reckoning had passed, but its lessons would echo in every decision, every policy, and every smile that greeted a guest at that once forgotten reception desk. In that transformative moment, amidst the quiet hum of reform and the gentle rustle of new beginnings, Keanu found solace in the knowledge that, sometimes, it takes losing oneself in a sea of indifference to truly discover the strength to rebuild, redefine, and ultimately rise again. There was a raw, unspoken beauty in the way the hotel, much like a wounded but resilient soul, began its slow ascent from the depths of neglect to the pinnacle of renewed grace. Each polished surface, every courteous greeting, and every meticulously executed detail spoke of a transformation that was as much about the revival of an institution as it was about the reclamation of a personal legacy. In the dim early light of dawn, as the echoes of the previous night's confrontation still lingered like fragile whispers of truth, Keanu Reeves sat back and allowed himself a moment of introspection. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, that change rarely came without its share of hardship and sacrifice. Yet he also understood that it was precisely in those moments of vulnerability and pain that true character was forged, a character that could stand firm against the tides of mediocrity and indifference. Every decision he made from that point forward was imbued with a sense of purpose that transcended mere business acumen. It was about restoring dignity, fostering genuine human connection, and reminding everyone, from the highest echelons of management to the newest front desk clerk, that excellence was not a luxury but a right. And so, as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the hotel underwent a metamorphosis that was nothing short of miraculous. Its halls, once steeped in a stifling atmosphere of neglect, now rang with the vibrant energy of renewal. Guests returned with a sense of wonder and delight, and word of the dramatic turnaround spread like wildfire through the corridors of high society and beyond. For Keanu Reeves, that turbulent night would forever remain a turning point, a vivid reminder that even when one feels invisible, the strength to reclaim one's identity lies within. His legacy, painstakingly built over years of dedication and sacrifice, was not something that could be diminished by the careless actions of a few misguided souls. Instead, it was a living, breathing testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that, when pushed to its limits, could rise with renewed vigor, fueled by the unyielding desire for justice, accountability, and above all, respect. In the end, the hotel was more than just a building, more than a collection of luxurious amenities and exquisite decor. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when one dared to confront adversity head-on, when one refused to accept the status quo and instead chose to ignite a revolution of excellence from within. And as Keanu Reeves continued to walk its hallowed halls, a quiet confidence emanated from him, a confidence born not of arrogance, but of a deep, abiding belief that every soul deserved to be recognized, every mistake acknowledged, and every moment embraced as an opportunity for redemption. Thus, the legacy of that night, with all its raw emotions, public confrontations, and decisive actions, became an indelible part of the hotel's history. It was a history written not in the sterile ink of corporate memos, but in the living, breathing experiences of those who dared to challenge the norms and demand better. And for Keanu Reeves, that legacy was not just a recollection of past mistakes, it was a promise for the future, a vow that no one under his watch would ever feel like a mere shadow among the living again. In the quiet moments that followed the upheaval, as the hotel settled into a newfound rhythm of excellence and respect, Keanu Reeves allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He understood that the path to greatness was rarely smooth or free of obstacles. Yet it was precisely those obstacles, the moments of pain, the flashes of betrayal, and the bitter taste of indifference that defined the true measure of success. And in that understanding, he found a profound sense of purpose, a purpose that extended far beyond personal achievement and touched the very essence of what it meant to be human. As the sun rose higher, bathing the hotel's pristine facade in a warm, golden glow, Keanu Reeves stepped into the vibrant morning, his heart steady and his mind alive with purpose. In one unforgettable night, he had not only reclaimed his own dignity but had ignited a quiet revolution, one that would ripple through the halls of his empire for years to come. What began as a moment of invisibility had transformed into a bold stand for accountability, proving that even the most celebrated among us crave the simple, profound gift of being seen. The lobby, once a hollow shell of neglect, now pulsed with renewed energy, its legacy rescued from the brink not by vengeance, but by a deep, unshakable redemption. This wasn't just about a hotel or a man, it was about a truth that lingers in every human soul: we all have the power to rise from the shadows, to demand respect, and to rewrite our story when the world tries to erase us. Keanu walked away from that night with more than a victory. He carried a flame, a reminder that even in our darkest, most overlooked moments, we can spark change. The lesson? Greatness isn't built on perfection, but on the courage to confront what's broken and the heart to rebuild it stronger. That night, he didn't just save his empire, he reminded us all that no one should ever feel invisible, and that every step toward accountability is a step toward hope. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt unseen and turned it into a moment of strength? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to know how you found your voice. And where are you watching from today? Let's connect. If this story stirred something in you, subscribe to Motivation for Success for more tales of resilience and triumph. We'll see you in the next video with even more inspiring journeys, because every ending is just the start of something greater. Until then, keep shining, keep fighting, and never let anyone dim your light.